In Acumatica 2021 R1, we have a new dashboard widget that we can see here when we go to add a new widget, and it's called the Key Performance Indicator, or KPI. I'd like to show you an example using this widget that I already built. This is using the KPI widget. Now what I'm doing here is I'm showing warehouse capacity, and I'm simply keeping it simple. I'm not doing volume analysis, I'm just counting bins. And because I'm counting bins, it's real simple. I've got 13 bins available in this warehouse, and right now I'm currently occupying 5 of those bins. And then I've got a number in here that's just 80% of the maximum of 13, which is telling me when I'm getting close, within 20% of full capacity. So let's take a look at how this is built. If I go in here and look at the widget, you can see I'm using this generic inquiry, which I'll cover in a moment. And then I'm picking, first of all, I'm going to refresh this immediately, and then I've got some fields that I'm summing up. And the key thing I want to point out in here is, first of all, we got this visualization type, which I've set to meter, and that's how we're getting the little speedometer type of thing. But the really cool thing I think about this is that with your normal level and your alarm level, that's what's going to trigger the yellow and red values here, back here. So my 10.4 in this case and my 13. It used to be that you could only come in here and pick an absolute value where you put in a number. Maybe it's 13 and you hard code the 13. But if there's ever a change in the data, it would always still be 13. It wouldn't change automatically. What's cool here is you can now choose inquiry field, and you can get that 13 in this case, but you can have it be dynamically calculated based on the data. And so I created a field called counter, and that's what's going to trigger whether I go into my red value or not. Then for my normal level, I just made that a percent value. And I said make it 80%, so it's going to be 80% of whatever my red value is. So in this case, the end result is that I'm summing up whether a bin is occupied or not, which is this field here, and then I'm comparing it to my counter field to get my total number of bins that are available in the warehouse. And then I've got an 80% value for my yellow. So what that results in is a 5. So I'm right here, I'm at 5 bins occupied. I've got my 13 value, which is how many bins are available. That's when I go red. I can't take any more than that. This 17 number down here, I'm not exactly sure how that gets calculated. It seems like it's just calculated as whatever number would be down here once it's calculated these two numbers. So this I don't think I have any control over directly. And then this 10.4 number is the 80% of the 13, which triggers when I cross into the yellow category. So let's look at the generic inquiry. First of all, I'll come up here and just point out that I did this just based on the wholesale warehouse to keep it simple. And the wholesale warehouse has a list of bin locations down here. So what I did is create a generic inquiry. I won't go into it in detail, but I'll show you the screens at least. I listed these tables. Then here's my joins, first one, second one. I did not do any parameters. I did a condition that just says only look at the wholesale warehouse to keep it simple. I then grouped the data by warehouse and by bin location. And then on the results grid, I've got 2 formulas. First one here is whether or not the bin is occupied. So I'm determining that if there's quantity on hand, then I'm going to count that bin as being occupied. Otherwise, it's not occupied. And then down here, I've got a counter, which I just set to 1, where I'm counting the bins. And make sure you do a max here, make sure you do a sum here in the aggregate function column for this to work correctly. Also make sure you put in a schema field. I just use quantity on hand so that it knows this is a number, because it's only going to show you numbers back here on the widget. Down here, these are only showing the 3 fields that are number fields. So make sure you set that schema on the generic inquiry right here. Once you do that, you've got a generic inquiry now. In this case, mine is showing 13 bins. It's real simple data, but you can imagine a really large warehouse. And my assumption in this very simple example is that I've got a really large warehouse and all the bins are about the same size. And I'm going to say, look, if there's something in the bin, I'm going to count the bin as being occupied. So I'm not getting super detailed. I'm not determining how much volume is available in the bin and then analyzing the volumes of my items. That gets real tricky because not everything is the same size and shape. You might have a certain amount of volume available, but you might have an oddly shaped item that's not going to fit in there anyways. So this is real simple analysis, and I'm just counting the number of bins. And you can see here it's telling me if I have quantity on hand. Then my formula is real simple. If there's quantity on hand, I'm going to be a 1, and I'm going to count it as being occupied. And then I've got a counter, which is always 1, which allows me to count up my 13 records easily. And then the occupied, if I sum this up, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 bins are currently occupied. So if I come back here, that's how I come up with the 5. I'm just summing up that occupied column. And then the 13 is just summing up my counter, which is basically the number of records. So real simple. But what's cool here is that these two things are dynamic. So I don't have to go back in here if I were to add bins to the warehouse and update the 13 to 14, 15, whatever it is. All I need to do is come into my warehouse and let's add another bin. So actually I'm going to go to the last page here, and we'll call this sort 3, sort station 3. I'll save that. I'll come back here. I used to have 13 bins available, and now if I refresh my dashboard, look at that, automatically I've got 14 bins available. And because this is 80% of whatever the total bins are, this also updated. It's now 11.2, which is 80% of the 14. Now of course I still only have 5 bins occupied. I haven't done anything with quantities. So let's do a quick test on that. Let's go ahead and do a receipt. And let's just put an item into a bin. Now let me verify that this bin, let's use sort 1. So right now we can see sort 1 has 0 quantity on hand. So it's not counted as being occupied. It's not one of my 5 bins. So I'll put something into sort 1. Just put a quantity of 1 in there. We'll release that. And now first we can check the generic inquiry. We can see that was calculating as not occupied. It's a 0. I refresh it. Now that's counting as occupied. It's got a 1. So if I come back to my dashboard widget and I refresh, my 5 now turns into a 6. So I'm now showing 6 out of 14 bins occupied. And then of course I can go ahead and sell that item. So if we take that same item in that same bin and release that, check the generic inquiry first. You can see it's no longer occupied, that's sort 1 bin. And sure enough, back here, if I refresh this, I should go from 6 down to 5. So pretty cool little indicator KPI widget that we've got here. And again, this is the really cool part, I think. I can add capacity to my warehouse. Maybe I set it up so that it only counts active bins, and then I could go in and deactivate using this active flag certain bins that aren't being used anymore, and the capacity automatically gets updated on this widget. I don't have to do it manually. And I think that's a really cool technique, not just for this, but maybe you've got salesperson sales quotas that you want to analyze. Those quotas are constantly changing. You don't want to have to come into the dashboard widget and change those every time. Or you might have other types of quotas, maybe for the receiving department out in the warehouse, or just some budget analysis. Do I have a certain percentage of my budget already? Am I at that? Do I want to track that? Or maybe even something like lead generation for the marketing team. I've got a certain monthly budget to hit, and when I've hit that, I want to know it. And I want to get an idea, nice visual representation here, speedometer. My eyes can really quickly communicate to my brain and get a feel for how close I am to my goal. And then you could even do just a green and red. You don't even have to do the yellow, but you have the yellow in there as well. And again, that upper bound, the 14 in this case, the fact that that can go pull from data now and not just be a hard-coded value, I think is pretty cool.